So back in 2016, my family and I just moved to India. And in my room, I had this floor length mirror. And it was really the first time in my life that I had a mirror like that in my room. And I was also just entering high school. So obviously, I was always up against this mirror, not kissing myself, y'all, just hyperfixating on every single one of my facial features. You know what I mean? You know what I mean. So when I first started doing this, I realized that, I didn't actually know myself. As in, I didn't know how my body or my face really looked. Because ever since I got the mirror, I started discovering these moles or birthmarks and curves and edges on my body. My body that I had lived in at that point for 15 years. And it was the craziest thing to me to not know what I looked like. So one day while I was examining my face in the mirror, I noticed that I had this very tiny pockmark near like the right side of my jaw on my cheek. And I immediately started freaking out because why the heck would I have a pockmark on my face? And even worse, how the heck did I not notice it till now? So I marched up to my mom and in this angry tone, like it was her fault or something, I literally snarled, "Did you know about this dent in my face?" And she just looked up in her nonchalant, barely conscious expression that she always gives me and just said, "Oh yeah, you got a rash on your face when you were 3, and even though we told you not to, you scratched it over and over again and then basically gave yourself a pockmark." And I was furious. I was just like, what? How do you expect a 3-year-old to resist scratching an itch on their face? I mean, you should have done something. And I was getting really mad here, right? And my grandma was sitting across the room witnessing this madness and watching me blow my head off to my mom, who really couldn't give less of a damn, right? So she called me over and she was like, "What's the problem?" And I showed my grandma this dent on my face and she's like, "Oh, that's just a tiny pockmark. Like it'll fill in eventually." And I was like, "Really?" And she was like, "Yeah, like it's not a big deal. Like it'll eventually fade." And when I heard that, I was so relieved. So I just like quietly went back to my room and just continued vibing in there, just doing my teenage thing. But then a couple months later, my dad moved back to India because at that point we had moved to India before him. And I was talking to him one day and I remembered this pockmark on my face. So I was like, "Hey, did you know about this pockmark on my face?" And he was like, "Yeah." And I was like, "Well, grandma told me it would eventually fill in." And he was like, "What do you mean?" And I was like, "Well, she said that the skin would eventually smooth over and regenerate and do whatever the heck skin does. And, this pockmark will basically be gone." And he just turned and looked at me and laughed and said, "Oh, it's not going away. She just didn't want you to worry." So I guess my grandma was a liar. And it sucked to know that my pockmark wasn't going to fill in, but it was awesome to know that she cared enough about me to lie to soothe my concerns. And if that isn't love, I don't know what is.